Good afternoon, everybody. This is Derek Krebs. I have switched up the audio. Sometimes we're at the mercy of the GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar control panels. Let's see, Rob or Bill or Maja, can you now hear me? Good. All right, welcome everybody to today's Prospero session, one of a long series of educational webinars that we have both for existing and prospective customers. My name is Derek Krebs. I'll be leading today's session with a focus on the Prospero budgeting, especially from an end user perspective, but I'll definitely show you some administrative side of the house. And just one or two quick PowerPoint slides, and I'll spend the time inside the application. I am a consultant with the team, been doing this for the last 25 years, and 15 years of those 25 years, I and the rest of the MSX group, we all started at FRX Software, where we were the original people that helped develop, implement, and support those flagship Microsoft products like FRX and Manager Porter on the reporting side and Microsoft Forecaster on the budgeting side. And then as we got acquired and then later spun off, Microsoft's no longer doing active development of those products. So close to 9 years ago is when we released Prospero. So it has robust financial reporting and budgeting. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's session. Here's just one little confirmation of the reporting and budgeting ability with the primary focus on general ledger data, but we can definitely include in the Prospero data warehouse non-GL data, as you'll see some examples today, especially on the budgeting side, taking budgets down to the salesperson, customer, product, or perhaps staffing HR down to the employee position, etc. And to paint just a little picture of some Excel challenges that many people are coming from within the budgeting arena, here's just a couple of those that I'll bullet point and then transition to one final slide. Really, we see some current challenges that many face today in the spreadsheet or Excel hell world today, of too many sheets out there, hard to consolidate, broken links and formulas, hard to consolidate, not one version of the truth, too much time to set up, and very error prone to that. And hence, that's where Prospero has stepped in with its maturity of the last 25 years, but the Prospero company name the last 10 years ago, to give you more control over that process. So very minimal year-to-year setup. So I'm always a fan of those people that are budgeting quarterly or monthly. So with a nice nimble tool, you can do that, get it out of the spreadsheet problems of those broken links and formulas. And we have all the nice centralization and consolidation of that data, leveraging our SQL database behind the scenes, and also the roll-up trees to combine, slice, and dice that budget data with all the extra bells and whistles in your budget, like HR and capital detail, audit trail history, line item details, nice security, just to name a few. And let me begin. I am actually going to be logged in as two different people within today's session. First of all, as an end user, and some visual cues that you'll see would be here to the left within what we call the navigation pane that I can minimize and then maximize. The main area I'll be taking us to is the input. However, we'll also look briefly at the published reports, where it's a nice central repository of all the reports that maybe you, the power users, centrally generate once you know your month end is done, or this user has actually been given rights to run a report. That way, when I do my budget entry, I might want to bounce quickly then to see some of my consolidated information, especially if I'm in charge of multiple company or departments. To the right, and when you log into the application, it defaults to this quick launch area, which is a nice one-click shortcuts to a couple of your favorites. Like here in column headings, there might be some various reports and charts as my favorites I frequent. Or secondly, in the budget input side, this input button. Over here in the top right, in regard to the quick launch, you can easily come up here and add additional favorites, like I'm on the reports area, or if you had different budget versions, you might be able to then access those. And that's what we call visibility, once we get later to some security setup side. And third and finally, we don't see it yet as this end user, but we also have what are called report collections. Like at month end, let me role play, I am the controller. I send all of you, my managers of our organization, this phone call. I send you 3 standard reports I can combine in the report collection and run it easily once for all company departments and publish that out. So I'll be going full circle with some of those thoughts here. Let me begin by opening up this budget input. We have a very user-friendly window based on your user security. And let me take a second just to acquaint you further with our demonstration company's structure that may be similar to yours. We're in a multi-company environment where this user, as I look in this company pick list field, has access only to company 1, our United States company. Or followed by maybe location department, you might have some similar segments or restrictions of what this user can or cannot see. And briefly on the location, this user only has access to our 1 Denver, but we'll see logged in as a power user, they'll be able to see the entire selection of locations, especially through maybe a graphical tree that I'll demonstrate that for. And this user does have, for a given location, all departmental access. And what's nice coming from the Excel hell world to this nice Prospero purpose-built budgeting tool is the cookie cutter approach we can have to our template or line design. So if I had, let's say, 10 locations and 10 departments in the Excel world, that might be 100 different Excel sheets or files. But many times in the Prospero world, it's one simple line set or template that all of those can share, which makes your setup and maintenance so easy. And then what I'll also do is I'm going to start with this administration department entering it. That might be one standard template, but easily you can define what we call overrides, which are really just unique templates or line set designs of what accounts and formulas that might be applicable to certain areas of organization. Further example to that might be I might have 2 templates or line sets, one for pure expense only departments, and then maybe a second line set design for some of my sales departments. Here in yellow, you can do any color coding imaginable you wish, but here are some of my heading for the year I'm now budgeting, along with the company, department, and location we're currently within. Second color coding that I prefer is a gray shade of those accounts that are locked that you stay away from versus Rowan's and white where you do enter data to. We have supporting backup, so some very high level bullet points that I'll get into detail on. Here might be in Human Resources tab where I list it by name or individual, who's within this department that I'm going to be budgeting for next year. On the capital side, new purchases of, let's say, computers, automobile, other equipment can be detailed out there. And then it flows up to this top multi-row tab for this one single department, what we call posting level. And then I'll bounce over to the reports a little bit later to then see my consolidated information. I'll be calling out a couple of icons in the toolbar. The first one I want to start with is I'm now in what I'll call Department A, a pure expense only department. And then I'll come up here and choose, based on my security restrictions or assignments, I'll go to a second department. I do have my font a little larger so you can see it more legibly on your side of this recorded broadcast that we'll be sure to share with you after today's session. But let me scroll to the right because normally I see all of these columns on one screen, but I've maximized it for you. But over here to the right, many times I like to have some prior year data. Like the first 12, or shall I say 13 columns are my 12 monthly budgeted columns along with year to date, followed by prior year actual, variance by both dollar and percent. And even I can have more columns than that, meaning more prior year actuals and budgets. And another common trend after 20 plus years doing this is, yes, to repeat from earlier, I see organizations now budgeting more often than just once a year, like quarterly or monthly forecast. I'm a big fan of. Secondly, they're actually doing rolling 12-month or multi-year plans, which I easily can add some additional columns. These additional columns I add are frequently months, but they also could be quarters or years that you enter inside future time periods or years. So you have that flexibility in your column design. And I'll show you some other out-of-the-box input screen designs because this is the most standard one where I have my accounts like revenue expense, statistics like headcount, hours, units sold, you name it. and the possibilities are endless regarding the statistics that you include in this Prospero data warehouse or budget side and actuals. To bullet point then a few areas I'm going to further take you to is, and role play entering some data. One would be line item detail, where I might take some, let's say, advertising line that says I'm in a marketing department and break it out further. Or secondly, adding annotations or notes to the account. Third, reviewing audit trail history of who changed the account and when. And then I'll get to some of my detail screens for HR and capital. And one additional screen to set the stage is I was opening up 2 expense departments just then. That might be my default line set that all departments share and use, but I might have an override when I go to a third department. And in this departmental pick list, I have access to the sales department within this location I'm in charge of. Then here is where you might want it to have a different template. Here at the very top, you'll notice here we have some units sold, price. I can break it down by customer, product, almost anything imaginable, as I'm thinking back many different Prospero implementations of different ways we've modeled this, but there's maybe one simple generic example to such. I'll come back to this time permitting. Okay, now as I return back to this completed screen, let me show you a few that have already been pre-populated, and I'll populate them thereafter. First of all, returning back to those bullet points, one is line item detail. You see this plus icon indicating with account with line item detail, where I might want to break it out for informational purposes. Let's say you, my boss, reviewing my budget, then you could see why Derek had budgeted certain amounts inside advertising, and we can add these nicely on the fly. However, if you have any fixed structure that you want to predefine in your budget, like I'm returning back to the sales template, yeah, by all means, we can add maybe the lines, statistics, and formulas ahead of time for any predefined structure, but line item detail is great for on the fly. The second little indicator here to take you to is this blue box indicating accounts or line item detail that have annotations next to them. I can hover on top of it to see the memo or note. And then additionally here to the right, we have an annotation callout window where I can add and see who added the memo and when. I'll be circling back to that in just a moment. And then additionally, here on the toolbar, I'm going to come up and show or display the annotations column. Normally I see it in my entire monitor, but since I increased the resolution, here then are some of the latest notes by what user. Normally it'd be like Bob or Sally, but we're using generic users in this demonstration, and time date stamps of when they did add it. And then how about for audit trail history, like legal services, I can put my cursor anywhere on this account. And then here on the toolbar, we have audit history of who changed the account and when. Right now it's currently blank since we just pre-loaded this maybe from our past best case or worst case budget or budget template, but that'll be a window I'll return to on history. As I circle back, now just go through some of those motions on line item detail. Let me do so actually through this second department of a marketing department. Now this advertising account, I'll just highlight to emphasize that's the one I'm going to pick on for my line item detail. I could start with an account balance, but I'm not required. Like I'm just going to stick $5,000 in this one random month. Similar type of phrase, my cursor can be anywhere on this line for advertising, account 7350. And either through an icon in the toolbar, I could insert line item detail, or through a right mouse click, I can right mouse click and insert a line item detail. It automatically gives me a suffix of number 1 for the first line item detail. And how about this might be my radio advertising? And perhaps that's what maybe that $5,000 was intended for. Or secondly, and similar type of keystrokes, I will then click on the insert line item button, gives me a second line item. How about I have then a television ad that I want to do? And how about before Super Bowl? I'll do it here in the month of November. Let's do $50,000 Super Bowl ad that I want to indicate and do. Now, any one of these line items, I can add further notes at not only the line item detail, but I could at the overall account level. And similar type of phrase, either through an icon on the toolbar. I can annotate to add notes, or similarly through a right click. Okay. I won't be too creative on that memo or note, but I can be very long in text and descriptions on that. And this time when I call out that memo or note, we then see the user, time, date, stamp in the memo or note, and we can add additional memos or notes. This might be my manager who reviewed my budget, and it's okay. All right, so you might then have a second user seeing those memos or notes on those items. I can then modify or delete them thereafter. And circling back to that earlier note for a little repetition and review, that is, if I want to easily review all of my accounts that have line item detail, I then just came up on the toolbar to show the annotation column. I do have this line item detail expanded, at least for this one account. So I'm just going to click the minus sign to collapse it, just like the plus icon can expand to see additional detail. And how about secondly for legal? I'll just come up here and insert a line item detail. This might be for my new contract. And then thereafter, I will then collapse all line item detail. So on the toolbar, or either to a right mouse click, I can collapse all accounts with line item detail or expand to then review them. I just did a Control S, like a shortcut for save. Otherwise, here on our quick access toolbar, we have some of our common little Microsoft similar keyboard functions, including, let's say, copy, paste, and many of our font controls, especially on some of the administrator setup sides as we make our screen pretty with bolding, formatting, shading, italicized, etc. As I'll just paraphrase a few of those. I won't go through all those little keystrokes, but future sessions, yes. Let's now turn our attention to Audit Trail history. I'm going to key in some dollar amount. I'm then going to save it. I'll change it to a different dollar amount. And even I'm going to copy this across to maybe months to the right. And I just did a Control R to copy that to the right, those values for the rest of the year, and then additionally saving it. Now for audit history, I'll demonstrate at least one of three ways you can see that. One is on a specific department or account, like this tuition reimbursement. I'll come up here on the history button. You'll see a couple of columns like what user. It'd normally say Derek, Bob, or Sally, but I'm logged in as a generic manager one user, time, date, stamp, and from what dollar to what dollar. That's the first example of audit trail history, where I put my cursor anywhere on that line or account. Now, the second type of history is if I had my cursor not on a specific line or account, then audit trail history then could be seen across multiple accounts. So here is this column here, different accounts for supplies, advertising, and then there's some additional detail of other accounts that were adjusted. And third and finally, maybe you as a power user in charge of multiple departments, you can also see audit trail history across multiple departments and accounts, as I showed you just sort of one department there, but that is the third way that I'll just summarize. So very nice audit trail history contained within the application to give you some nice visibility and control behind that process. Now what we'll do is we're going to turn our attention to the human resources side. That's one of the largest costs of organizations, and normally ahead of time, you as the power user of the budget, we import all of our existing staff ahead of time for our user. That way they simply, if you wish, maybe you don't want them to do any edit or viewing of the data, then maybe you allow your managers to make edits for new hires or fires. Or many times organizations, as you have several options, like maybe three I'll quote, one might be yes, all of my managers perhaps would have HR visibility and HR edit access. Or secondly, maybe they have read-only access to the HR tab. Or maybe third, maybe they don't see this HR tab at all regarding our security restrictions. And I'll take you to just one or two accountant-friendly windows in that regard, because Prospero, like those flagship products that we helped develop and deliver during the Microsoft era, we always say it's by accountants for accountants. little or no IT involvement. Before I get to the HR detail, let me call out some larger dollar amounts, like we have salaries, and actually we have two different expense accounts we hit for salaries. And in Prospero's terms, we call those pay grades, depending on different salary accounts you get hit. Additionally, the system can keep track of optionally, but yes, I favor and do like to keep track of statistics like headcount, hours, and FTE, where I can do some nice little key performance indicators along with some units sold, margin amount that we saw a brief on the sales side. Additionally, along with some of my salary, overtime, and bonuses, we have our related benefits like payroll tax, life insurance, workers' comp, health. That's automatically and centrally controlled. From an end user perspective, here's where you've previously imported, let's say we have 500 people in our organization. You've easily imported all those. Does not matter what payroll system you're on. You simply just need a couple of columns of their employee name, their department they're in, maybe company or location, how much they make, and you import that in. If you give me the ability to add new hires, I can come up here and click on the Insert button, followed by here's the existing employees we have either in this department or system. But I can click on the New button and perhaps give it a new employee ID and what hire date they're going to start. I won't go through all those motions in this abbreviated session, but easy to add a new hire if you gave me control. This might again be read-only, or I might not see this tab at all. Now let me look at a couple of columns just going from the left to the right. Any employee ID and names, fine. We also have some reference fields to the right for additional job descriptions or titles. The pay grade, you identify what this name is, and that really just goes back to maybe the two different expense accounts or more that you might have. You might have cost of goods sold salary account or SG&A for general and administrative expenses going to multiple different ones. So that's what defines pay grades, and along with a few other benefit differentiators might. Hire date, which we see here to the right, only two columns currently. And this is what we call budgeting HR annually, where I just have two columns of when they start and end. Otherwise, I could also break this out by month. So if you have any cyclical nature, like, all right, winter months, we have our Christmas demand, I want more hours during that, or during summer months, I can break this out by month if I choose to. Allocation column, I briefly did skip over, but currently we're seeing people in both salaried and hourly designations. And over here in the toolbar, that's what we call mixed that we have in this department. But if I wanted to show everybody on an hourly designation, our default is 20 hours, but you can do other than that based on any maybe close months or weeks that you have during the year. And then here's where I'm showing everybody on the same page on a full-time equivalency in this allocation field. To the right is perhaps their starting pay rate. We have pay raises, multiple during the year. We're only seeing one pay raise, like this person starts making $25,000, then we're going to give them a 10% raise in period 3. Bonus could either be defined in a bonus percent or dollar. You have the options of both on that. Along with it's not currently seen or maybe editable, there's additionally an overtime field and benefits that you define. And let me take a moment just to further show you benefits. And this is going to be through the end user side, and then I'll briefly show you a nice administrator window that controls these designations or benefits. Similar to the MSX group, we have employees, I think, in about 10 different states. Therefore, Derek, I reside in California, and when I get imported along with the other California staff, I'll have maybe a California tag next to my name along with my department and how much I make. Or secondly, you can define what this column heading is, like health, workers' comp, maybe pension, cell phone, yes or no, as I'm providing some other common examples of additional benefits that we could add that are common out there. And let me just take you now on that same related thought. I'm going to go to a budget administrator screen. In the input definition, where you define what global line set is being used for everybody, or what default column we have. Let me even open up the budget to be apples to apples in the next phrase or two. Then one related note that we saw earlier, this is what I call the default line set that every department uses. However, on this override tab, whenever I pulled up a Department 200, we might use a different line set. And then locational, I could be very granular, meaning just this one single location and one single department might use a different line set that has different accounts, statistics, or formulas, but usually you just have a handful of them. But then additionally, let me take you to this location field, because throughout my entire organization within Department 200, this is what I call a list view of our departments. We have two levels, both posting and summary, but I can come up here and use a selection tree, and then you define this tree. But here's maybe a common grouping by our regions. And then within, maybe here's Midwest. So all my 4 prefixed Midwest centers. And once I look to report, that's really the glory behind this product too, because I can have some budget definitions, meaning all my entire organization, meaning all regions for Department 200. Whenever I go to the data input screen for any Department 200, it's going to use this line set. This tree also uses ranges and wildcards, which means it reduces or usually avoids maintenance altogether when you add new departments, and that same story could be for adding new accounts, where we use summary accounts like total expense and expand to show all, which is an awesome new feature versus the old hell way within the Microsoft stack or Excel here when new departments or accounts get added. And continuing left to the right on a couple of recaps, this time on the human resources side. The top half of the window is the different expense accounts you hit for salaries, like those 2 that I had called out. Here is where we have a real live link to your general ledger. So as I browse into the natural account, here's where we're reading directly from your general ledger database for such on a real-time basis here, or whatever frequency you would want for those updates, especially actuals loaded. I won't go through all the designations here in my session later today. We'll go through a little bit more specifics, but let me at least show you briefly on the bottom half of this screen, we have our benefits. That could either be a % of salary with a limit like FICA, 6.2% at maybe this limit. And then the system, Prospero, does all that complex if-then logic down to all the departments and individuals automatically for me. Versus some other products we worked with past and present, to do the same type of setup would take me probably a whole day or 2 to doing some tricked out formulation and Excel guru nature on that, but that's not applicable in Prospero. So I applaud all of our development and support and QA teams for making that easy for by accountants for accountants. Second example of, yes, a benefit with a % of salary, but no limit for Medicare. Or here might be health insurances. Over to the right, we see a couple of columns, and you can add more as I'll demonstrate, like state. As I mentioned, we have employees in MSX across 10 or so states. Or health insurance, you define the column heading and choices, because I can come up here and insert. This might be maybe HMO or PPO at maybe different rates that you want to define for health insurance. And the possibilities are endless thereafter for workers' comp, maybe cell phone, yay or nay. And here is one field, benefit filter. I can simply click on the up arrow. And excuse again the resolution here. I made a larger font here, but it just added this new user 4 field. And how about this might be my pension or 401k plan, where I want to have choice A, B, or C that I can simply add and define either rates or percents, and either import that ahead of time if I usually know the information of what their health or state or pension plan they already have devoted, but any new hires, we might do a default amount. All right, so that's some of the easy HR setup where we define the expense accounts for salaries, maybe some default rates that can be defined hourly or salary by individual and overwritten, and then benefits down below. Let me now take a moment just to show you a few little other odds and ends regarding some non-standard budget input screens, but yes, they are easy to create inside Prospero because you have almost infinite flexibility of what your line or secondly column or third prompt of your report is. On that last phrase, prompt, as I click on the open input button, yeah, you notice here that we have many company location departments as our different multi-company or responsibility centers, I'll generically call that. I'm segregating my budget by. I'm also reflecting on some bottoms-up budget that usually I do, but many times I'll do a mid-level assumptions that I want to push downward or some top-level adjustments downward. So allocations, adjustments, what-if types. So the system definitely can do that, but we're going to start with a little bit more standard look and feel behind that. Now in this forecast template, I actually got asked the question the other day about Derek. We mid-year or whatever time frame, we want to bring in actuals into the system and then budget out the rest of the months. And then my question was, well, do you budget out a rolling 12-month? Their answer was no, but I was mentioning, oh, well, you easily could add 6 months or 12 months or multi-year to the right for any future time horizon you want to budget, even though we only have just the current fiscal year. Now, instead of your old Excel hell or manual ways, this is automatically done for you for actuals because on the Prospero reporting side, we automatically read from your general ledger, either actuals or budgets, but going forward, you don't have to do all the manual exporting and importing of budget and actual to and from your general ledger database and whatever past budgeting tools you had because it's all self-contained and real-time within Prospero. I want to emphasize some of those glories and ease. Perhaps then a second screen I'm going to take you to of just a few different input designs, as I'm just going to close out a couple windows and not save because probably have me or others doing this after our call today, sharing this same demonstration image. On that note, demonstration image, we'll be glad, maybe on a concluding remark, do a little one-on-one follow-up for any prospective customers or even a free trial version that we have, either this demonstration database like I'm showing you, or even better yet, most people want us to maybe use a sampling of their data. Second, or shall I say third input screen, would this be this one where I'm going to have my companies in column? How about I'm now turning my focus more centrally, maybe in your shoes of a multi-company where you might have some intercompany transactions eliminations. And this screen design, in columns especially, instead of having months, years, etc. in the columns, we have companies because my main column of data entry for the budget, and I probably should have done more cleaner color coding to indicate that, is this elimination column. Because how about I'm going to key in $200,000 or whatever amount. Sometimes even I have a formula for the offset here, but then there might be some elimination. And if I wanted to break it out by month, I easily could. And sometimes behind the scenes, we might have hidden columns where I take these annual amounts, break it by month. So you have that luxury of what level of detail you want seen or not. And there's a couple of toolbar icons that I'll just call out regarding showing hidden columns or showing hidden lines that might aid in sort of that role play scenarios. I'm just showing you again some food for thought of other template designs we've done. All right, I'm just going to exit away. That is where definitely I'll even just show hidden lines. Looks like I'm not showing the account number, but these are just my major elimination accounts that I might want to budget for more centrally and aggregated without having to go to a bunch of different areas here. The next design screen, just to share with you, would be this one here, where similarly I have the accounts as lines, but instead of companies, I might want locationals as columns. And part of me also sharing with this is not only the budget input side, but this also could be the budget review side of houses, just to give you confirmation that we could have it on both sides, both budget input and report. So similarly, I am showing the account number advance on this screen, but instead of companies, maybe locations. And then we even can split it by a month or different regions I can group this by. I do want to return to one final one here. I'm just toggling now instead of accounts like revenue expense, balance sheet, or statistics as our lines. This last one, before I get to the next topic, would be departmental lines. As I open up this screen, Now, notice how on some of the other screens, I was restricted or limited by my selections because, like on the company in columns window, I was not asked for the company because that was defined in the columns. And similarly, I'm not asked for department because departments are defined in lines. Or secondly, I'm not defined by company because maybe I have pre-coded this data to go to company one. Because maybe I have three companies, but company one is my major company. So you have the option to predefine some of your budget parameters or prompts if you do not budget at those levels. So that's also a nice, very new feature that was not in your old Microsoft world. Okay. And let's now render this last screen, but I just wanted to call out a few of those prompts that I glossed over in the last screen or two. All right, so there's just a little sampling. This case, instead of revenue expense, stat, or balance sheet, we have departments and lines. And now I have my main accounts and groups like sales, COGS. I even could have number of units sold, or these might be customers or salespeople in the lines. One little side thought to that, under segments, we read these directly from your general ledger database. Even we're adding new interfaces all the time based on new requests. We have a long list, so any prospective customers, feel free to jot my email down. I'll wrap up with. We'll be looking to those. In our demonstration database, we have a natural account for balance sheet income statement accounts, location, department, and then additionally, we might have behind the scenes multiple different databases, but a company is not a segment in our general ledger. But what we do automatically in Prospero is we create this virtual segment, recognizing and grabbing all the multiple companies. Many times it's contained in one sort of Prospero login if they share the same chart of account structure, but some of our companies have multi-company where they don't, where I might log into just company one or that consolidated group of companies that might be US with this chart structure, or I might log into a different Prospero database for maybe my European companies that might have a different European structure. As I'm thinking past projects we've done of newly acquired or ever growing companies that we can nimbly act upon those. And what I'll also do is I'm going to add a new department here, 777, because literally in seconds for any new proposed departments, companies you want to budget for, I easily can accommodate that. So literally in seconds, without me going through all the rigmarole and steps inside my budget or general ledger, I'm now going to go back to one of my budget input screens. Since I'm logged in as a power user for security assignments, I'll now budget to that new department. It's going to use that standard same template, but this might be a sales department within that rolled up range in my tree where it might be using that override. So literally in seconds, I can then budget for new proposed items without having to go through all the rigmarole. Let me now take you to the report side to now go full circle with this budget input. Then I'll shed a little light on some security. Then we'll wind down our session for today, but we'll be sharing this recording and question and answer for any that do come through. I am now bouncing to the report. Let's look at this income statement favorable, unfavorable report. I'll then just run it for all companies and division departments. As we see here, I have as administrator a few additional runtime settings like date, transaction level, yay or nay to show. And I love the data that's all real time. And I think this is one of the best drill downs I've seen in the market, as I still work with several different third-party products out there as well on the budgeting reporting side. That is, when I drill into this data, especially maybe through you, a power user's shoes, or anybody in your organization, I can double click and see the detail. Now, in this particular case, we have a great feature, what is called reporting tree levels, that I can then subtotal my drill down within. My first click or drill down was the company, like company 1 or 2 for US and Europe. Or I drilled down, that might be my locations of Miami, Denver, and San Francisco. And I can continue going further down to the different department and even account and transaction level. And this is the transactional level where you can show like vendor, customer, other detail informations behind that data. And this is for all columns. because other applications might only be a single cell or single column you can drill in, but this is across multiple columns, multiple further breakout, subtotal in this case by department last. And really, I'm just closing out a tab, and I can even multitask good. I do not have to close and reopen windows excessively like I might have done in past instances. And one also my favorite features is that was the default drill down. But I'm now going to come up here and change my drill order, because usually I predefine my preferred way, usually company first, location second from top down, maybe department third when I first illustrated this. But how about I'm going to drag and drop location to the top. Now, instead of drilling into company first, simply on the fly, I'm going to take it out to those locations. I can display this data as a chart, even three-dimensional chart. I can come up here and copy it to maybe share in an email, PowerPoint, etc. I can export that data to Excel. I can drill down further to my next level, in this case, company, because the first level was location. And I'm going to do the reverse. Instead of the graphical view, I'm going to switch to the report view to then see the data maybe in this form, or even export it to Excel. I'll just keep some default name and path for right now. And this is just one sort of two-dimensional Excel file that I'm exporting out, meaning just one Excel sheet. But there is all my fonts, shading, controls, headers exported out as well. And let me just show you one other example here that I have. This one Excel file that might be multiple sheets or tabs based on my last publication of the report. So excuse me, I might have been playing around on a few of those. And let's see, I probably have one right here. Excuse me, that one. We are seeing perhaps a report multi-company, like here's all companies, company 1 in Excel, company 2, and additionally I could have sent it to printer or PDF, since we now brought back a lot of those options that used to be in the old FRX product that Manager Porter took away. So there's some other common questions we get for existing and prospective people to share then. A few key recurring themes. I'm always a control freak. I want to make sure only the data gets in the hands of people I intend it to, like some of this sensitive HR data or maybe company and departmental information. So me, the bean counter, power user like you might be, little or no IT involvement, we're doing all this literally in about an hour or so on an implementation. That is, we come to security. This user area is the only area we work within. And then in this middle left area, these are the different roles or groups. We have some standard ones out of the box. You can relabel them, or easily you can right mouse click, add a new user or new role/group. When I mentioned on the budget side, we have a lot of granularity, because one little comparison I did last week on the reporting side, especially many of you coming from Manager Porter or even Forecaster, there was a lot of restrictions, but maybe 2 or 3 security related, new features and enhancements the last several years of Prospero, and ever growing, changing, and improving Prospero is based on feedback. One of those is Manager Porter had a decentralized security. You had to go to all your different folders in your report library or published reports area to secure every single folder. Then in Manager Porter, you had to go to every tree, and then every tree within, which could be hundreds or thousands of units of your tree, and secure every one of those, versus Prospero is centralized. Maybe second thing, example of 3 of old bad ways and new improved ways. My PowerPoint also recaps a few of these little things, is Manager Porter had only 4 rigid roles that you had to work within. But Prospero has as many different infinite really roles as you want. Also, I see a few of you had used maybe Manager Porter and Forecaster in the past. You had to double your work in those applications on the budgeting reporting side. Now, only one application and one process now to do all of that. And let me now take you to further the centralized security model. And in Manager Porter, you had to rerun every single report spanning months and years over time if any of your security assignments or department change. That again is only in the manager porter era. Not applicable to Prospero. Now, key thing related to that is let's look first at what we call role or group security. Then secondly, I'm going to look at individual user assignments of what company departments they have access to. Let's start with this role or group security, especially on the budget side. In this section here called input user role, well, one is, can they input data, yes or no? HR, and if they did have HR, maybe it was a read only. The second point down below, because maybe the control freak might be me, the controller, CFO, or maybe the person in HR. Maybe this is turned on read only, and only new hires, fires go through the central chain of command. Or if this is turned off, then this user would get no HR visibility at all. That tab would be completely hidden and invisible to your end user, just to name a couple of the items. I'm going to expand this roller group. We have this one user we've generically named as a standard user, but one quick little note on ways you can log in and even deploy Prospero. You have several options. Either it's hosted and installed internally in your servers, or secondly, it could be MSX group. We host this application in a database, or you might have a third-party provider that's very common for this day and age that might host your accounting or ERP system. That we have several Prospero customers that are using a combination of those three ways. Now in this login window, many times IT will prefer us to use Windows authentication, which we can leverage the same user ID and password you log in every day to your network or your hosted environment. Or we also have standard users that maybe could, on a rare case, be shared, but usually it's a named user because Bob has Department A sales or Sally Department B marketing. They only get to see what they have, but here are standard users, and we have standard users for our demonstration. And final bullet point on security, at least for assignment related, is me, this business analyst unit for the West. I can add additional lines as we need be, but usually just have a couple or a few. Here is just the different companies. The asterisk, that's a wild card because maybe this user has all company access. Location, it could be a single individual department. Like here, this could be a single individual department that Derek has access to, or better yet, I reside in California. I might be the Western region manager. This is just a node of our tree. Instead of individually listing it, we probably should have done it like this wildcard below. That way, if things change, I centrally control all of that, usually for wildcards, which might be little or no maintenance involved, and that will go downstream to my security, to name one powerful thing of these roll-ups for consolidated reporting. A second, maybe third for some overrides like my admin expense departments only or my sales. These powerful roll-ups can be used, and for calculation logic. These roll-ups are central and powerful for all of those. And maybe one last thought or two on security. Let's talk about a budget where you might have your base case that everybody is working on, but then maybe internally you want to work for management. Only you, the power users, work on a best case budget or worst case budget. So I gave an example of 3 different budget versions just then. But maybe that base case, yeah, I'm going to allow everybody to have visibility for it. So this button here, I'm on maybe my base budget or base version, visibility. Yeah, I might allow all users to see it. But how about on my best case or worst case budget? Maybe not. I'm not allowing everybody to see that. And I can click on the insert button, and then I can get very granular, usually at the role, like all my power users in that role might have visibility to this, or I can get more granular down to the user level as well of who can access and edit this budget version or not. All right, let's see. I know we're starting to wind down here. Usually what we'll do is the question and answer, since this is a little bit more of a listen-only type recorded broadcast. Usually what we'll do is field questions and share those with all through a follow-up email that'll probably be coming in probably about a 2 or 3 day time once we download and update the recordings to our website. But let me just look in the question queue as I have to joggle through a couple windows now here on my side. But otherwise, in the meantime, let me pull up a few concluding little remarks and slides. One definitely is a big thank you for joining us today. So glad to help in any way with your existing Prospero implementation or those prospective ones that are finding out more of the product capabilities. We'd love to provide a one-on-one overview of the application for you, including that trial site that most existing customers took advantage of, even using a sample of your data, reports, and budget versions. We have all the conversions of FX Manager Porter. And by all means, there's my email. It's an open door policy, so feel free to reach out at any time if you have any follow-up questions. And let me go back to the question queue. All right. Otherwise, I'll say a big thank you, and I'll follow up through an email in the next couple of days. But have a good rest of your afternoon and upcoming holiday season. Take care.